Hello, everyone. I am Pooja, CEO and co-founder of GoKidu. And today we have someone who need literally no introduction because he has already came to our previous section, like where he really gave us like really deep insights about like donors and recipient both. But today's session or podcast is all about recipient, and we will cover specifically a section about the things which recipient need to understand while they actually start their journey and choosing the donor. So with us is an experienced sperm donor who has been moderating many Facebook groups for sperm donation is Joe Roderick. And thank you once again, Joe, for being here and sharing wonderful insights, which is going to be very, very useful to somebody who is starting their journey. So let's start with this wonderful session about the first step, which is about donor selection.
Yes.
So anybody, Joe, who is looking for starting this journey and like having this question, okay, now I need a sperm donor. So there are four things which you told me that people generally look for. One is the physical characteristics. They need to understand insemination method, post insemination questions, which they should have with for the donor. And the last one is how much they should be like ready for this entire thing. So let's start with the first thing. So physical characteristics. What do you think like kind of things people look into the donor and how important this particular section should be?
Right. Right. Well, it's my pleasure. Pooja, thank you for inviting me again. Yeah, I think donor selection, I mean, there's a lot that goes into this. And when it comes to the physical characteristics, typically the most recipients are more interested in what they see on the outside. And that is definitely a factor. Often there's the case that they're trying to match their partner's characteristics if they're married. And so eye color and hair color and body type, general face shape, things like that are things that are important to them. Height, body mass index, athleticism, you name it, right? So they kind of look around knowing that they have something in mind, but uh, they're looking first and foremost at like I'd say eye color is probably the number one thing. And there's a lot that goes into eye color. I mean, if you study genetics at all, it's just because you have blue eyes, it doesn't necessarily mean if you procreate with a donor who has brown eyes that you're going to get blue eyed and babies and so on and so forth. Most people know that blue eyes is a recessive trait, but green eyes are also recessive. But anyway, I'm getting a little sidetracked here. But the physical characteristics are important to a lot of people. Now, what I have found is single women are a little less choosy, and because single women typically are more interested in perhaps the ongoing relationship with the donor after conception. So with that, physical characteristics important. Now, also what should be considered for physical characteristics are what's on the inside of the donor. And for example, does that donor carry any genetic conditions? Are they allergic to something? Many women are interested in any sort of health screenings that the donor has had.
Yeah.
And if they've had genetic testing done. So that's something that's on top of their mind because some of them often know that they carry a recessive gene themselves. For example, sickle cell trait or cystic fibrosis are two of the top ones that people are worried about. And they would like to know if the donor has either of those traits and what the risk of their child inheriting them would be, right? So I think that's something to consider. Not all donors are willing to do genetic testing, for one. Some of them are worried about their genetics being, their DNA being owned by a separate company that 23andMe just went down, and now tons of DNA out there is owned by somebody else potentially. So it's a concern that many donors have. But what I would recommend to the recipients is, have genetic testing done with your doctor first and have that so you know that if you are carrying something that you can ask that donor about it, and I think that's probably the best step for a recipient before she even heads into this, if that's something that she's concerned about. Now, the other thing that I would say on this subject is if you have a donor with a high number of offspring and none of his offspring have exhibited any traits, any recessive traits, you're probably okay. I mean, it just depends on the rarity of the trait that is being carried, right? If it's
Mhm.
1 in 100, that's quite different than 1 in 1,000.
Yeah.
So, however, but if they have other donor children that are basically all healthy and not exhibiting any traits, it's probably a good sign. If
Yeah.
they've had any other offspring with previous recipients and there is something to be concerned about, then you should know about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So Joe, tell me one thing. Like, I think last time you mentioned that uh, like there should be the list of nice to have and must have. So where does the outer uh, physical characteristics should be into nice to have or must have? Like, because people often find it very difficult to balance it.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think every woman is going to have her priorities, and I think she needs to make sure that she is willing to examine those priorities. For example, some women, while they would prefer to have a certain physical trait, they might be okay sacrificing that because maybe the donor has every other trait that they want. But if the priority is that they have ocean blue eyes and the donor has like dark brown eyes and no blue eyes in any of his family, I mean, that's probably going to be the deal breaker.
Mhm.
So I guess they just need to figure out how important that stuff is to them. Well, besides having your priorities, the one thing I would just say to women and couples who are looking at getting a donor is you have this idea of what you're looking for, and you're probably going to find that I mean, you may find the perfect candidate. I mean, he may be out there. There's a lot of people in the world, right? But the connection that you have with him is pretty important. Like, is he reliable? Is he a good communicator? Does he seem like into it?
Yeah.
I think that's an important thing to have on your checklist, because what's going to happen if you're dealing with somebody who's wishy-washy or new at it, and there's a lot of ghosting in this, you're going to be all set to go and you're all excited, and then all of a sudden he drops. Responsiveness is really an underrated thing when looking at your donor, for your donor.
Yeah.
Does he respond to messages like that, or do you just not hear from him?
So So since you are already touching on this point, I want to just mention that, okay, fine. Now moving forward from physical characters, what are the other things which they should be like not doing any compromise upon at all?
Well, I think that if the woman carries a recessive trait
Yeah.
that could really have poor outcome with the child, and the donor is not tested for that genetic trait, or he has some previous offspring to compare to, I would say that's probably something you definitely don't want to compromise on.
Yeah.
If a woman has cystic fibrosis or carries cystic fibrosis, you really need to know if that donor has been screened for cystic fibrosis. And because, I mean, that's not something that you want to pass on.
Yeah.
So that's something I would say too. I mean, this is all a different part of the donor selection, but STD testing, if this is just kind of a routine thing that
Mhm.
experienced donors do because women need peace of mind, and that they're getting something that isn't going to infect them with something. And so if he has a history, like in my stuff, I have all my previous tests loaded up, and you can look at this and say, okay, yeah, he's been testing regularly for X number of years, and always has tested negative. So that you're looking at a good trend there, right? One, he tests regularly, and two, if he's not contracted anything. So those are a couple of what I would say deal breakers. If they don't ever have STD testing or genetic screening for something you carry.
Yeah. So for anybody whom you recommend is like the first priority is no genetic problem. The second part is STD test, no compromise over there.
Mhm.
And do you think semen analysis is very important, or how important is that?
Yeah, it can be if you're dealing with a new donor.
Yeah.
If you are working with an experienced donor who has ongoing pregnancies, a woman who's carrying a child, I mean, chances are nothing's happened since he's donated, and it's your turn. So
Yeah.
that probably not necessary to get that semen analysis in that
Yeah.
got that man's
Yeah.
case, but it's a new donor and he doesn't have any children, or maybe he hasn't had children in a long time,
Yeah.
several years. Then maybe, yeah, you want to make sure. And that doesn't the semen analysis. It's a kind of a nice thing to have for a woman, just
Mm.
for some assurance, and it's not a difficult thing. There's actually over the counter
Yeah.
fertility test for men. Like you can go get just it's in the tampon section or
Yeah.
feminine needs section or a birth control section, whatever
Yeah.
a drugstore has. You can find one in there, and it's going to tell you, it's going to detect if there's fertile sperm there or not.
Yeah.
And if you can take that, it's helpful.
Now, moving forward to how do they assess the donor when it comes to values or education and all those kind of things? Does that matter to?
Yeah. Well, they say that education. So if a donor is educated, obviously they have invested in their future.
Yeah.
There's a degree of intelligence there. And although they say that not all intelligence is inherited, it's mostly the environment you grow up in. But
Okay.
nevertheless, I mean, a genius donor is kind of a nice thing, to give your kids a chance. But so if that's important to you, I think the one thing that I experience with women who I help, that they can tell that I've been educated and they appreciate that, that their kid may have a chance at becoming educated if that's something that they value.
Mhm.
I would segue this into what you're thinking long term in terms of your donor conceived child. And what I mean by this, a donor conceived person
Mhm.
is going to have, for one, they should know about it. All too often we see in these groups and connections made that women really don't want anything to do with the donor after conception. And now this varies from the type of recipient. Like I said before, single women are more likely to stay in touch with the donor, whereas same-sex couples are less likely. And because there's a lot of emotions wrapped around this, right? I mean, having helped a lot of people, I can tell you that infertility, be it male or female, is a major source of trouble in a relationship.
Mhm.
And numerous people divorce over this. I mean, it's a major, if one partner wants children and the other can't get them pregnant, in this case, because you're talking male to female, it's very stressful. And in a same-sex relationship, the non-conceiving partner already has a little bit of insecurity often because they know that they can't provide them what their partner really is yearning for, and that's to be a mom, right? They're already a little insecure about it, and then so the donor is a little bit of a threat. I mean, the donor is a little bit of a threat. Sometimes they just kind of want to. They take the attitude, just give me the sperm and I'm done with you. And a donor like me, I'm not necessarily a good match for a couple like that because I kind of want to stay in touch after conception and hear how things turn out.
Yeah.
For one, I feel very strongly that a donor conceived person know that they're donor conceived
Yeah.
for their own peace of mind and health. In a same sex relationship, it will be pretty obvious to them at some point. A male contribution had to have been made for them to exist, right? So, and I don't think a lot of younger couples think this through. And what I'm spending a lot of time on this for is because this should be a factor in your selection of your donor.
Absolutely.
What is his attitude towards staying in touch? Will he meet the child one day? I believe that, and just knowing from my experience, that the best mental health outcomes in donor conceived persons who are already prone to having some mental illnesses and depression and struggle with their mental health, that they have a much better chance at having a better outcome if they, one, know about it early in life, and two, if they have the option to meet the donor. Yeah. And if they don't have that, it can really drag on for years and affect their mental health.
Yeah.
So is your donor, now let's be clear too, there are different types of donors. There are anonymous donors, like you get at a sperm bank, right? There are known donors, that is, the donor, you interact with them, you have all the real information, and there are known anonymous donors. Now, what I mean by that is you don't necessarily get their real name, but you have interaction with them, you can reach them, and they're all different levels of interaction. Don't confuse communication with co-parenting.
Yeah.
Some people are just deathly afraid of communication and interpret it as, oh, the donor wants to be involved.
Yeah.
There are plenty of donors who they have absolutely no desire for co-parenting. They don't have no desire to be involved or an uncle or something like that, but they do kind of want to know. I mean, there are donors who avoid going to a sperm bank to donate because they don't like the thought of just having this person surprise them one day and say, oh, by the way, I'm your offspring from the sperm bank, or they just want to have some knowledge and that's it.
So all of these kind of things is more about post-conception communication, but this thing needs to be already cleared while you actually choose the donor.
Correct.
And like so in your experience, people who are like more shy have this kind of communication very openly done, and why it is very, very important for everybody, for the kid, for the intended parents, and also for the
Right.
donor.
Yeah. It's just going back, the ability to go to your child one day when they have the question and say, we know who your donor is. We can even reach out to him at some point
Mm-hmm.
and have you meet him. But you need to be clear on how you feel about it as the recipient, and you need to be clear about how the donor feels about it as well. So, with the post-conception communication, women who are shy about this, this is good. Being interacting with a known donor can be a little intimidating. For one, as sad as it is, some women just have had negative experiences with men, and they feel a little awkward, a little uneasy about it. So it's going to be hard for you to make this connection. And some women are here because, for lack of a better word, it's more affordable, to get pregnant this way and finding a free donor, but they would like to minimize the amount of contact. And you're going to need to get over some of your fears a little bit, because it's going to be really difficult to do this without having some sort of a interaction. Now, I will say, from how I tend to work my exchanges, the recipient and I, when we meet up to do an exchange, she sees me for all of like 15 to 30 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
and now we will have, before that, spend some time like on a video chat. Just I go over the basic insemination logistics and how that works and picking it up and getting it. I kind of coach her a little bit on how to do AI. We also talk about post-communication conception,
Yeah.
or post-conception communication. I'm sorry,
Yeah. Yeah.
and what her expectation is. We also cover the legal aspect,
Mm.
which varies from state to state. I'm in the U.S. and that is very important to cover. It's a different podcast, really. So that all that stuff we talk about in a video chat, which takes 20 minutes to 30 minutes. And, I think that video chat just makes the whole process go smoothly.
Yeah.
It's a little weird to show up and your first interaction with a person is, well, here's a cup of sperm.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do that without having some sort of face-to-face interaction.
Mhm.
So selecting a donor that makes you comfortable is really important. Like, you should pick up a good vibe in that video chat. Like, okay, yeah, this dude, he's I trust, I get a good sense about him,
Yeah.
and women's intuition is really important. If it's telling you this is okay, it probably is. If it's telling you that something's off, then probably not.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so that, getting over your shyness, it can take a little bit, but it's nice to do a video chat as a sort of a go between.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't have that face to face interaction, but yet you're talking to each other directly.
Yeah. And like go with like the clarity, right? Like what exactly do you want? And like because see it's like becoming parent is like one or two or maybe three times event in the life, and like you can't compromise and being shy while you're like literally choosing for your kid, right? Like so definitely suggesting that get as much clarity as possible and have as much open contact and connection and the communication, especially with the donor, because they are here to help you. Majority of the donor whom I've come across, they do not charge you, but like you should also respect that they are giving you your time. So at that time, try to maximize the chance of this communication, building the relationship, because you never know, that person can be like the extended uncle in your child's life, right?
Right.
Uh, and that is a nice bond. And I want to like talk about one more thing here, which Joe already mentioned earlier, that uh, it is more likely that your donor conceived child will have a better mental health and life when they know it about that they are donor conceived early in their life childhood, because that also, because in the childhood our personality is getting built, and when
Right.
when you incorporate that knowledge, that helps child to cope with that, as well as having perspective around it from the childhood. And by the way, 70 research has said that 70% of the donor conceived child want to meet their donor or genetic parent at least once in their lifetime. So uh, the post conception communication is very much key, because you are like laying down the foundation after the conception has happened and your relationship with the donor. So it's like absolutely non-negotiable when it comes to you choose the known donor or even like semi-known or known anonymous donor.
This is the main benefit that this
Yeah,
offers, I think. I
yeah,
mean, it is you have the opportunity to have a child who has a chance at a good mental health outcome because they know their genetics.
yeah,
And now sperm banks offer this more and more, but of course that comes with a price.
yeah,
And but this is very simple. I mean, the other thing that I think many of my recipients have found kind of nice is if they ever had a question, be it a trait,
yeah,
they can just reach out to me.
yeah,
The other benefit that is offered is I can connect other recipients so that they know of other half siblings. And because probably the number one concern that some women have with using a donor, and this is a concern whether you use a private known donor,
hmm,
private anonymous donor, or a sperm bank donor. Just because the child is from is a donor conceived person, a DCP,
yeah,
uh, there is going to be some curiosity about the other donor half siblings,
yeah,
but probably the number one concern that people have is will they encounter a half sibling in real life,
yeah, yeah,
begin a romantic relationship with them, and then find out they're half siblings.
yeah,
And now this is the stuff that happens in movies, and I think the few cases that you hear about it in news reports are unique because, well, it's so rare. I mean, if you look at the odds of it happening, it's a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent.
yeah,
And but nevertheless, I mean, there is a concern about it, and the way that you can get that concern addressed earlier in one's life is to use a known donor and be aware of the other half siblings. You know,
So,
it's a huge benefit that a lot of people don't even think about. You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
most people are just on a mission to get genetic material and because the baby fever is running so high,
yeah, yeah,
you
yeah,
know, that they don't think about the long term what could possibly happen long term, nor do they even really concern about well how the child may feel
yeah,
because they will get older and they will have their own opinions.
yeah.
And what I just to put if there's anybody watching this, and in particular a same-sex couple uh, who is worried about the donor child wanting to have some connection with the donor.
Mm,
I have numerous donor children, and
mm,
what they're going to find is it's the day in, day out, daily activity and involvement in that kid's life that is going to make you the parent. Like,
mm,
the connections that you make with them growing up, this concern that you have, it's entirely on your shoulders. Like, it's entirely on your shoulders to make the connection with the kid. And if that's done, they will identify you as the parent. They
mm,
they will not identify the donor as the parent. And
yeah,
having met a number of my donor children, uh, none of them have wanted like an ongoing relationship. My oldest donor children are in their mid to late teens now. And I've yet to encounter any who want like me to be a father figure to them.
mhm,
All of them consider their parents, the even their non-biological parent, they consider them to be their parent. And that's a fear that can just go in. They'll start to realize it fairly soon as you're getting up with the baby to do midnight feedings and
mhm.
keeping them from sticking their fingers in drawers and stuff. All of the activity that rearing a child carries with it. Like it's going to dawn on you really quick.
Yeah,
Uh, and you won't necessarily, that fear can dissipate.
yeah,
That okay, I don't want the donor to be involved because I don't want the kid to identify them as a parent, you
yeah,
know.
yeah. Thank you so much, Joe, for addressing this part. So since we are on already this like very important point of post-conception communication, like what do you want to tell those people? Like when somebody ghosts the recipient in the end moment, and when they post that my donor ghosted me, is there anybody around me who can donate me? It actually breaks my heart that this is like you are gonna have a child maybe 2 or 3 times in your life and you're choosing for the child like choosing 50% genetic material for your kid, you're going to live with that kid for the rest of the life,
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
can't like choose the donor like in hush hush in 2 days, you know what I
Now,
mean?
I'm going to say something that may counter what your point is here, but I'll also say something to support it. Uh, it it's okay to make that post looking
Okay.
for a donor that your donor ghosted you because I have numerous recipients of mine who I have kept in contact. We have the the contact beyond conception, the communication beyond conception, and they would never have found me had they never made the post,
Oh,
right?
I see.
And they have children, and they're happy, and it all turned out well. Now I will say to counter that, like take your time, like you would know if you made that post, like finding a guy to come through who's a good guy who has good genetics who matches what you want, who's gonna stick with it, like y- they're a diamond in the rough. I mean, they're really
Yeah,
gonna
sure.
be rare. Yeah, so have some lower expectations with it. But if you get some Yahoo who's like, yeah, let's meet up, and they're not very forthright with the process and
Mhm.
donors and recipients come to these situations because of one thing. They're interested in procreating, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that is the main drive here. And so it all sounds good, like to a lot of both recipients and donors, like that urge to procreate is what drove them there. But then after thinking about it a little bit, it's like, I don't know if I want a little piece of me running around out there in the world. And it's a little more heartbreaking when it happens to you from the recipient's perspective, right? To be ghosted.
Yes.
Yeah, simply because you had your heart set and you put all this work into it, and the timing is important and getting it all nailed down. And then this guy who you had been counting on doesn't respond.
Yeah.
It's a little more heartbreaking. Now, from the donor side, this happens to us as well. Like you go through and a woman and making plans, and most of us try to like avoid conflicts with other recipients trying, and we may have decided to not help somebody else because they had reserved your window, and then all of a sudden you're gone, and they could have helped somebody else. But in the end, all it is our DNA didn't get out there. I mean, that's we're not having to worry about the long-term consequences of the donation as much as the recipient. And in the end, it was our time and effort and of communication, and we move on. Right. So,
So,
but
like those people are lucky because see, you as a donor is like very thorough donor. Like you know, like what you're doing. So even if you're like meeting somebody in the last moment, you will make sure that what they're signing up for, right?
yeah,
But see, the ghosting in the first place is happening because you did not assess the donor properly first. You did not create the connection, right? So it
yes.
all goes back to the first, be very clear and have a nice relationship with the donor. So let's move forward to insemination method. How important it is to communicate well in advance about the insemination method. What kind of communication should happen from the recipient side to the donor when it comes to setting up the expectation for insemination method?
You're saying insemination method.
Yeah, uh, like
Yes, yes, yes. Okay. So AI being artificial insemination, NI being natural or just sex. And I mean, there's no secret that probably men are more interested in a natural insemination. And because many women who are here are not interested in men, they're probably more interested in artificial.
mm,
Um, it's my understanding, the assumption using GoKidu is that it is artificial. But
fish
of
on.
course, people are adults. I
Mm,
mean, they have their own lives, and there are plenty of women who may choose to have a natural for legitimate reasons. Maybe she likes sex. Maybe she doesn't want it to be clinical.
yeah,
Maybe she wants it to be as fresh as possible. Um, there's maybe she doesn't like to do AI. Maybe she struggles with that. You
yeah,
know, there's all kinds of reasons one might consider natural, and there's nothing wrong with it.
yeah.
I think it's important to have the right expectation. Personally, as a donor, I just assume AI. I
Yeah.
mean, it's what probably 80 to 90% of women prefer. Even the more open-minded ones, um, they may start out as AI and choose to switch, but they know that if they put out NI, they're going to get slammed with responses.
Yeah.
And so the other thing I'd say about AI is you know that the guy who's donating is probably serious about donating.
Yeah.
Um, because for one, and I would couple with that he is probably fertile because
Mhm.
one of the things that goes through a woman's mind when she's considering a guy to do it naturally is, well, what if he's actually not really even fertile? What if he just wants sex? What if he say had a vasectomy and he's just doing this for jollies? And the one thing that you can be assured with AI, like no guy's going to want, I suppose there could be people who this is a thrill for them, but I mean, he probably intends to impregnate you if he's donating to you artificially. So I think that's always a good sign. And I think it's always a good sign when you have a donor who is okay with either method and it's up to the recipient, you
Yeah.
know?
So I have heard like many donors, like they sometimes like push people. So how recipients should react in that manner? Because that
Yeah.
is also very important part to assess the donor, right?
Well, I would say, if you want AI, you state AI.
Yeah.
And I would go to the additional level of saying, I will not consider NI,
Yes.
in your advertisements or your profile or whatever.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, or even if go to the opposite extreme, if you ever bring up the subject of NI in our discussions, I will ghost you in a heartbeat. You know,
Yeah.
just make it clear.
Yeah.
So for one, if you do get a guy pestering you for it and pressuring you, that you have clearly stated it and he is breaking the rules, right? He can be removed by whatever moderator mechanisms in place.
Okay.
The other thing I would point out, do not be uh, deceived by someone claiming NI has a higher rate of success
Yeah.
than NI.
Yeah.
That,
Thank you for pointing that out.
yeah, that is a point that guys, now, one would logically conclude, yes, making a baby naturally would, through regular sex, would be have a higher degree of likelihood of success. Now, I don't do NI anymore, but when I did years ago, that I found my NI recipients conceived on average 1 to 2 cycles faster than AI. So there is a little nugget of truth to it, but the rate was basically the same if the woman stuck with AI. And I only attribute this, then again, it's my own, I'm a single data point on many. So just keep that in mind. I just attribute it to her learning how to do AI. And sometimes it takes a cycle or two to learn how to best do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so but the AI works just fine. I have tons of first time AI successes.
Hmm.
Any donor who, now I will say this, I coach the women I help a little bit on how to best do AI, like
Hmm.
the how to do the two methods, the soft disc method or the menstrual cup,
Hmm.
or the what's known as the turkey baster method, right? I kind of coach them a little bit on how to do that, so maybe that helps my rates of first time successes improve. But AI and it's all about the same. It's all going to be about 25% of a chance of success each cycle you try, give or take, if everything is perfectly timed. And so don't go down that path of where this is how, nature intended, and yada, yada, yada. Just, you know what he's up to, and don't buy it and stick to what you want.
Yeah.
You want this to be a good experience. Like,
Absolutely.
you
And plus,
don't want this to be some sort of like awful memory you had because you just wanted a baby so bad, you know?
yes, yeah. And like think about again, like you are gonna have a post-conception relationship with this donor. Don't do any of those kind of thing where you had to, then you no longer will have the relationship because you are not feeling well, that somebody like deceived you or something. That was the reason why I wanted you to, address this point. So since you already mentioned it, like anybody who is trying, generally, if the sperm is fertile from the person, and if like women's fertility is also fine, generally, how many cycles does it take?
Yeah, well, I can only state my personal stats. 40% of my recipients conceive the first try.
Hmm.
40% of the women who I've helped get pregnant, I'll say it, that happened first try. 2 to 3 cycles, within 2 to 3 cycles, roughly two-thirds of the women are expecting.
Hmm.
And within 5 to 6 cycles, 85%.
Yeah.
All right. So I'd say the average is between 2 and 3.
Yeah.
And again, I often don't think, I think women should sometimes, when they're going through this process because it can be very hard to get negatives, right? It can be very hard to go through all this effort. And so many women think this is just going to magically happen the first try. And they don't realize that it's actually kind of hard to get pregnant. And they're just crushed, right? And then come to find out after the insemination, I usually get a lot of information beforehand, but they weren't really testing. I mean, they weren't really doing ovulation tests. They just used the calendar on the app and it said it should be good during this window. And it's like, I hear that and I'm like, okay, don't even count number one. I mean, it's almost as if we didn't just try because you didn't know the timing was perfect, right? And so that wasn't really a good try. Or maybe, she didn't realize, oh yeah, I should probably try and inseminate as soon after I get the ejaculate as possible and not wait a full day, or some hours. And so there are things that you learn through this process that will eventually lead you to be successful if you learn from them. Sometimes failure helps you learn, and it will drive you to figure stuff out. And the cycle timing being the perfect example in this case.
Yes.
Yeah.
And see, the reason why I wanted to ask this to Joe, for everybody to understand that, first, don't get demotivated when you don't get pregnant in the first try, because as he mentioned, it's a chance, right? When everything is fine, when you know exactly what you are doing at that time, maybe this happens. But as he said, the first is not even countable because you learn how to do that. And when you consistently monitor the strips of your ovulation and walk through the process with the discipline and commitment, there is definitely a chance that maximum like maybe 6 months, when everything is fine, like semen is fine, your fertility is fine, you can get pregnant. Right.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's something which I wanted to point out for everybody.
That 6-month mark too, I think, is a good one that you mentioned. I always say going into it, expect this to take 6 months.
Okay.
And if it's anything less than that, then it's a nice surprise.
Yeah.
And only at the 6-month mark do you start to get a little like, what is going on here? Like, why is this not happening? But it kind of is like rolling dice, I mean, if you have a 6-sided dice, you have roughly a 17% chance of getting a 6 every time you roll it.
Yes.
Well, it may take you 10 rolls to get the 6, or it may happen on the first roll.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you just keep rolling the dice and eventually 6 is going to pop up.
Yes. Yeah. What a nice example, Joe. Shows your affinity to mathematics and probability. Okay, so I want to move forward, and I think this is the last section. It's more about screening and vetting. So I know you covered so many of those things, but we never touched about the values donors have and how much it should be weighted upon, and like, does values really being passed on? I personally think that it does. I'm more of a nature side thing, because I have seen so many traits of my father in me. What do you think about that?
With the screening and so I think you brought up I think people think of their own personal history and background, and it's important to a lot of people, right? And certain cultures, like, for example, a lot of recipients are just hell-bent to find a donor who matches their cultural background, just because it's really important to them. Now, on the other flip side of it, a lot of recipients are interested in diversity. I mean, they're interested because maybe for whatever reason they want a or a diverse background in their child. And maybe that's just the type of person they're attracted to, So yeah, there's another benefit here of getting to interact directly with your donor is, do you vibe with them? Like, is it, do you find something that you like about them? And what that could be the thing that drives you to make the right selection, So I think that's something to consider in the back of your mind. It's more than just eye color, you know. Yeah, you want certain habits, you know. You want certain traits and you want certain behaviors that sort of come naturally. And if you find that appealing to you interacting with the donor, maybe your kid has a chance of inheriting something that you found appealing about him.
Yes. Yeah. And like how much medical history they should dig in of a donor's medical,
I
like
mean,
family
it's
history.
whatever's going to make them comfortable. Like in my case, I have had cystic fibrosis and sickle cell screening, and I don't carry either. I don't intend to do any of the genetic testing that a lab keeps my DNA.
Mhm.
But that being said, I think a lot of women want to. Okay, what is your exact ancestry? Where does where on earth does your DNA originate from? You know, are you part Neanderthal or you know? Uh, but that is something that they can ask because certain traits or certain recessive conditions reside in certain races more than others.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that's important. Now, I will also say that it's also just one piece of that puzzle. I mean, it, you know, some people are okay with maybe not having the perfect donor, but they know that, okay, if he carries a recessive trait for this, but I know I don't,
Yeah.
they'd probably be okay with it, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
So
that's why knowing at least half of what your half, right? The recipient's
it's
half.
very important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, that's probably more important than the donor, to be honest.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Because like if you know that you are carrying recessive gene, you can ask that. Now, I know I have asked so many questions, but I can't miss this one, Joe.
Okay.
Personality. How
Okay.
much is asking about donor's personality is okay?
This falls in the how much do you really want to know about them? I mean, some women want to know a lot, some don't. But um, you know, personality that that some of that is inherited, right? And uh, if is the donor tidy or is he, you know, does he have certain habits that you like or not? But personality, do they make you laugh? I mean, a person who has a good sense of humor, you know, that's generally considered to be a sign of intelligence. And if they have some wit, you know, it's certainly more fun
Yeah.
to go through the process with the person who can make light of a situation and make you laugh. At the same time, are they compassionate? You know, do they have empathy? Or
Yeah.
you know, one thing that I try to, you know, just impart on my recipients is I know the journey they're on is not easy. Like many of, especially a lot of recipients in these groups have been through fertility treatments, and the reason that they're there is they're running out of money because they've spent so much money on
Mm.
fertility treatments and sperm at sperm banks, and the thousands of dollars have racked up, and they're now just looking for a more affordable path. And so it's a hard journey, especially if a woman has had to battle something like PCOS or endometriosis
Mm.
or fibroids,
Mm.
the three most common fertility issues.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
and, or, I mean, the reason you're there is you need a male, right,
Mm. Mm.
to help you. And
Mm.
your partner, or if you're single, you know, you don't have a sperm source. So
Mm.
it's hard to be on that journey wondering where it's going to come from. I mean, and you haven't even started the insemination logistics yet. I mean, just wait to try and get pregnant by a guy you don't live with.
Yeah.
It's hard. You know, it's a hard, that's where the stress comes in, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I mean, couples trying to conceive, this is 600,000 babies are conceived around the world every single day, right?
Mm. Mm.
Um, And so this isn't unique. People are doing this, but of that 600,000 babies that are conceived, like you don't hear the stories of how long it took to get to those. I
Yeah, you
mean,
only hear the success stories.
yes, yeah. I mean, and it can take a while.
Yeah.
So, buckle up because it could be a bit of a ride.
Yeah, yeah. But so, Joe, I think like we are very good about like we have covered almost everything. But this is one thing which I wanted to like talk with you on, and I really want everybody to hear this because I personally think that the reason sperm bank ever existed and was for IVF treatments, that was for infertility in a way, because the whole concept of freezing the sperm, okay, and then doing the IVF. IVF is all about you need one sperm cell or maybe two, three, four, five, and you take sperm cell and then you put it into the egg to create an embryo. But anybody who is not having the fertility issue, I personally think that there is no point of like asking for a sperm from sperm bank until you only want to have an unknown donation where you don't know, you only know the wrapper of a product.
Yeah,
I really feel very weird like that sperm is not a commodity, but it's being sold as commodity.
yeah,
So until like you are like so insecure or like so have a very different kind of mindset or opinion until you want to go for like really like a even for reciprocal IVF, I wouldn't like suggest that you go to take the sperm bank sperm, right? But like for anybody who is like not having a fertility problem and they can do the at-home insemination, I think uh, it makes more sense to go for fresh donation rather than you take it from like frozen sperm, which has half of the sample already died, like semen, right, in that
yeah,
freezing process. Um, and maybe you can add what do you think about this or
yeah.
like
Well, yet another benefit of using fresh sperm, um, that I mean, just comparing the rate of success, fresh versus frozen, which
yeah,
is a common topic for people to discuss. So I've donated at a clinic before, as a directed donor. And years ago, I was an approved sperm donor, and they have to test your sperm to see if it can survive the cryo process. And only about 5% of men have sperm that can do that. So the gene pool is limited by that 5% there.
yes,
Um, Now, what they don't understand is when you're buying, so they're actually not called vials, they're typically called straws.
straws, okay.
Straw, yeah. What they
Mm.
do is they take a man's ejaculate and they literally let it sit on the counter in its container for 30 minutes to an hour and a half, depends on how busy the tech is.
Okay.
At that point, they will have mixed that sperm with a freezing medium or freezing buffer because it's going to go to the cryo process, right?
Mhm.
They let it sit and mix because the sperm need to be evenly distributed through the sample, all right? And
Mhm.
then they pull out a straw, not a literal like drinking straw, but they pull out they pull out this storage device,
Yeah.
and it's going to once they put it in, there's going to be 20 to 40 million sperm in this thing. Okay,
Yeah.
so they would take, and it depends on how big of the ejaculate is, and that will depend on how long the man abstained for,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, prior to that ejaculation. And
Yeah.
so they will take as many of those straws out of one ejaculate as they possibly can. Okay, so
So how many do you think would be in that one straw? How many
so,
millions?
so 20 to 40 million sperm. All right.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
So
because
that's all
when
you're going to get when you get from a sperm bank. That's all you're going to get when you get one
yeah, but
vial or
this is weird, Joe, because like even like if you go for like normal fertility thing, they need minimum 40 million sperm cell in your sample. That's like the bare minimum. And below that, there is a male fertility problem. So like they're just giving you like
yes.
bare minimum.
Yeah, yeah, oh yeah. Well, and not even that. Like, if the guy is a high producer, this is like why they like certain guys more than others, because if he produces a lot of motile sperm,
Yeah.
and he has good motility ratings, he has good morphology, they really like those guys because if you produce 100 million sperm a day, which was basically the rate I was quoted at for my samples,
Mhm.
if I abstained for 4 days and there's 400 million sperm there, and they divide that up into 20 to, they're getting 10 straws from me.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right. I mean, this is ultimately why it led me away from. I thought it was a bit of highway robbery, and
Yes.
you're going to get. Whereas if I donated in person and abstained for 4 days, you get 400 million sperm, right?
Absolutely. I would say.
Yeah, it's literally like 10 times more, and
Yeah.
so the 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 chances are going to be greater, and the cryo process does kill off some, and there's a little bit of a zap to them. They're a little less modal, and so that's why success rates with frozen tend to be 10 to 15% if you time it right.
Yeah.
And with fresh, it tends to be basically twice that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so this is yet another benefit of using fresh sperm. Like you're going to get more, there's going to be more motility. And depending on how far away the guy lives from you, it could even be more convenient, right?
Convenient and not at all like, see, in that 40 million Semen cell, you're like paying minimum $1,500. And this time you're getting like 10 times more, which is like, say, 400 million.
Yeah.
And you might be like paying, say, 100 or $200 for gas or something like that, maximum, maybe sometimes, right? This equation is so mind-boggling.
If you just apply yourself a little bit and find a guy, I mean,
Yeah.
you save a lot of money.
Yeah.
Maybe you can afford it, but you're just frugal.
Yes, and like all the benefits which comes with it, like you post-conception relationship, that is the diamond, honestly, in this entire process. Like your kid, you're securing your kid's identity generation will be like more natural, more healthy there than anything else. I mean, there is no price to that,
Yeah.
honestly. Like people should be very grateful to the sperm donors. They should be. Um, and respect them because like I have heard stories where people like recipients are ghosted. That's okay. That is legit stories, but like I have heard like more of the other side of horror stories as well, where people don't respect these people who are like investing enough time into like building this relationship, provide sperm. They should also be treated fairly and well. So the respect should be from both the end and for each other. And that's
Yeah.
what I want to emphasize enough and enough and enough. Do respect these people who are like helping you out as well.
That's a great message.
So, so the
Being
last thing,
appreciated.
the last thing which I want to ask is like, so for anybody who is starting the journey, if you can quickly summarize in like say 1, 2 sentences,
Okay.
what would it be
Bullet
for
pointed
choosing the
would be
donor? Yeah,
learn your cycle.
yeah,
It's the number one factor if you're going to get pregnant or not.
yeah.
Not learn it, ovulation test it. All right. Know what you're wanting from your donor when you go into the process, the conception method, the
Mhm.
insemination method, that is. Uh, the traits that are deal breakers or not.
Mhm.
All right. Be prepared to video chat.
Mhm.
It's your number one way of preventing from getting scammed, too.
Absolutely, yes,
Right.
yes.
Uh, and be patient. Like, don't expect immediate success.
Mhm.
Expect it to take a little bit. Those are probably, oh, and I would add to that, just make sure you get yourself genetically screened
Yes.
and ask your donor for testing, STD testing at minimum.
Minimum two testing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Wonderful. I mean, like Joe, these sessions are getting like more and more exciting. Next time we are going to cover uh like a little bit further than this, like logistics, insemination logistic part in the
Okay.
next session. Take wonderful insights from this video and make informed choice. It's about your kid. Don't take it lightly. At the same time, have fun in this entire journey because it's you're gonna remember one day. You're gonna laugh about it, right? That we did a lot of interesting thing in the journey,
Oh, yeah.
and and don't take stress.
Yes.
Okay, sweet. So see you guys in next session. Bye for now. Thank you.